Are you an independent author with an incredible story to share? Are you afraid your book will get lost in a sea of books? True Vine Publishing Company can help you stand out. We're not just a publishing service, we're your partner in success. We provide personalized marketing strategies and eye-catching covers that will captivate your audience. We will build your author platform and connect with your readers. We have helped countless authors achieve success, and we can help you too. Break free from the shadows, take control of your publishing journey, and make your mark. Visit TrueVinePublishing.com or call 615-44-BOOKS to schedule a consultation.
Hello, this is Timothy Bond with True Vine Publishing Company, and you're watching the next episode of The Right Change, where our guest today is Dr. Eric Williams, author of Marriage Communication Guide for New Couples. Dr. Williams, how you doing today?
Look, man, I'm blessed. Great to be here. Great to have an opportunity to sit on your platform and share all things I can share about this book and anything else that we can chat about today.
Absolutely. And first of all, I want to thank you for the opportunity to be a part of this amazing vision that you've had. And it's just been a great pleasure to work with you. And, you know, this week we've seen an explosion of sales. So it's exciting to see that the fire is catching. And so this is a great opportunity to let people know about this amazing message that you have for couples. And so let's just get into it. First of all, I want to give you an opportunity to tell a little bit about who Dr. Williams is.
All right. I will try to keep it as brief as possible. But I'm a Georgia native all the way through, you know, born and raised in Albany, Georgia, and growing up in South Georgia, and just really seeing a lot of families, a lot of family members are down there too, kind of learning, being a student of relationships and marriage all my life. So have two brothers and the oldest of three, and was able to go off to school and decide, hey, you know, it's probably a good idea to go to school for marriage and family therapy. And so I did that back in about 2001. Decided that, you know, counseling was the way to go, being in mental health, doing marriage and family therapy. Spent some time in the military, Army veteran. I got out, came back to my mental health roots, and decided that I really want to continue working with couples. So since I'll say 2006, when I got out the military, I've been working with individuals, couples, families, just to really restore kind of what I call the brokenness or the disconnectedness that we're seeing a lot within our own culture, and as well as other cultures across the nation. And so what I've seen a lot of working with a lot of military couples is this doesn't just affect just our culture, but I'm seeing people who get married outside the country and they come back, and I'm realizing that, hey, you know what, this is more of a universal issue, something that I really want to work on. Also, I'm married, been married now for 18 years. I have three beautiful kids as well. So my wife is beautiful, my kids are beautiful, and I've really been trying to walk the walk and talk the talk when it comes to all things relationships. So that's a bit about me. I also have a private practice that I work in, and been doing that now for at least the last 10, 12 years, maybe longer than that. But so I've been doing a lot of that work too, and specifically working with couples and families. So that's a bit about me. I try to keep it short, but that's probably a little longer than I had planned to share too.
Well, I want to tap back into, you know, not to be redundant, but you talk about, you know, going into marriage and family counseling. And to me, that just seems so specific. What was the spark that made you say, I want to really focus on this specific?
That's a great question. I'm glad you asked that, because I get that question quite a bit. And just to give you the story, the context on that, I grew up in a family where my parents divorced when I was 13. And so at that time, was young, not really know a whole lot about it, but I just knew that, okay, sometimes marriages don't last. And then both my parents remarried other people. And then those marriages didn't make it either. And so I've been able to kind of see what doesn't work. And I think part of it too was the idea that looking at the impact it had on my brothers, myself, looking at other people that I knew who had gone through a situation where their parents were split up, I realized that it was something that maybe God called me to do because I don't think I had the best model for like, hey, you should do this. But it
Mhm.
was something that I think God spoke to me and says, look, this is where I want to place you. This is where you're going to make the best use of the gifts that I've given you. And so I started working with couples ever since that point. And so going through school, the work just seemed natural. Felt like, I mean, it was hard work, but it just seemed more natural. It was like a natural fit. Um, Even to the point now where I feel like when I do work with couples or even writing this book, it was not a lot of work for me. It was not hard work for me. It was just the idea that I need to get this out. And it's something that just feels natural when I do it.
Now, were you doing counseling before being married?
Funny story. So I remember telling a lady, I worked in a mental hospital before,
Uh,
and I was working on my degree to be a marriage and family therapist at that time. Not married, no kids. And a lady asked me, she says, how are you going to counsel other people to do with families and couples, and you're not married yourself?
uh,
And I was young and cocky at the time, wasn't really, wasn't as emotionally intelligent at the time, but I said, well, you don't have to tell me that the stove is hot for me to know that it's hot.
uh,
So I can pick up from other people and other people's experiences to know. And so, but I did go into the field at that point very early, very young. I was about 23, 24.
mhm.
I didn't get married till I was 29,
Okay.
but understanding enough about the world, the experiences that I've seen kind of allowed me to have at least a false sense. Maybe it's genuine, but at the time, false sense. I know what I'm talking about. So,
Uh,
but it became more real to your point too. It became more real once I became married. And I was like, oh, so some of these things definitely are you have to adjust for, and all marriages are not created the same. And so that was a great lesson once I got married to realize that what works for one person doesn't work for everybody.
mhm.
Yeah.
When you got married, did you find yourself saying, "Oh, I need to practice these things that I'm telling everybody"? Like, what was that transition?
The interesting piece for me was getting married. I mean, my wife, and I don't mind sharing this with the world, but what I think every couple should go through counseling in the beginning. I think we all believe that we know what we're doing, we know what we're talking about, or we believe that we're better than everybody else that we've seen who didn't do it right. But coming into it, even as a person who studied it, trying to implement it, trying to do it, it is not easy. And I think in some cases it works against me because I'm like, I think this is the right way to do it. And not understanding that there's no one right way to do it. But I thought that in the beginning. So I was trying to do it the right way and realizing that there's no just right way to do it. There's the way that works for us. And so I had to learn that piece along the way that my wife, what she needed, what she required was not me to be right. She needed me to do what worked.
Yeah. I think that's so interesting and amazing. Like you went into marriage, you have a unique experience here because you went into marriage with book knowledge and then
Yes.
you had to realize
Yes.
like, oh, 1 + 1 does not equal 2 in marriage.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. Right. But even in that, even with that, it was like I became a better counselor too as a result of book knowledge plus experience and then more experience working with other people. It took a whole lot. And then all of that too, working with other couples helped me realize I can be better in my own marriage. So there's this bi-directional influence here where the work that I do with other couples is inspired by the experiences I've had personally and professionally, but also the experiences I've had professionally helped me as a person, in my personal life too, in my own marriage. So yeah,
I think it's really important. Like I love the candid and transparency that you have. Like,
yeah,
I think it's important because one of the I think toughest things to deal with is issues in the family, right? Especially in the Black community. You can stop me if you think I'm wrong, but or correct me. But in the Black community, it's almost like the notion of going to get counseling is not what we do. And uh,
right.
how do you deal with that? Do you deal with that within our
Yes,
community, like
yes,
overcoming that stigma?
yes. I'm gonna give it to you two different ways here. So there's within our own community, it is harder for us to accept that. And I'm not one to discount any other forms of help out here. I
Mhm.
know the church community in a lot of ways will also lend themselves out to be supportive too. And say, look, come to the pastor, talk to whatever, if it's the pastor or it's the apostle or the preacher, whoever it may be, but you talk to that person, maybe talk to them and the first lady about some of the things that are happening. And there's been sometimes issues where there's been a bit of a rift, not intentionally, I don't think, but between the church and mental health and how the best way to support people. So some people I've heard say, look, you don't necessarily want to go see a counselor, you should go to the church and work it out that way. So I've seen that within our own community. The
Mhm.
other thing though is when it comes to males in our community, and so this is where if there's going to be one side that's going to be more likely to seek therapy, females in our community are more likely to seek it out more so than males.
Mhm.
That's always been the case, and we can go all the way back to earlier times when the Tuskegee Airmen and the being allowed to experiment on
Mhm.
Black men at that point,
Yeah.
that can play a role in it, I believe. I think there's also other factors that play a role in that too, which could possibly be a whole nother book title one day. But a lot of factors when it comes to our community, especially getting Black men in, is tough. And so usually when I get a referral for couples counseling, family counseling, I would say 8 times out of 10, it's the wife who's called me
Mhm.
or who's reached out. And usually they're reaching out because they've seen something about me in my profile that say, I think my husband would work with you. And so they become that gateway to get the guys in. And so that is that's a barrier that I see, but it's also something I think we're making some great progress on.
So let's get into this amazing book, Marriage Communication Guide for New Couples. Um, and what was the catalyst that made you say, okay, it's time to write a book?
Yes. So the right the idea of writing a book has always been something that has appealed to me as another part of the journey in this as a counselor.
Mhm.
And what I realized over time was, and this just comes from years of experience working with couples that are, within the same state as me, maybe different states, people who are from different parts of the world. There became this sense that a lot of the issues that people were dealing with were very common. And so we've all kind of heard quite a bit now that communication is really the key to a healthy relationship. But I found
Mhm.
myself in therapy sessions a lot, just kind of saying the same thing and kind of providing the same tips. And so I was like, maybe it's a good idea to put something together in a way to give to my clients so they can do it prior to even coming to therapy, or for those that I end up getting to also see, um, maybe they can use this as we do therapy. What I
Mhm.
also learned along the way, though, was when couples are having some issues, usually there's a delay between the time they start having issues and the time they actually seek therapy.
Mhm.
So if I can get this book out in people's hands before they even have to get to therapy, my hope is that in some weird way, it decreases the amount of people who need to come see me. If I can help them on the front end before they even have to come see me, that's great. I think this book serves that purpose to be able to give them something early on in their relationship, which is why made it very specific to couples that are early in their relationship, for new couples. And I would maybe classify new couples as anybody within the first 5 years of their marriage
Mhm.
to really help level set expectations, to learn how to communicate so that it really decreases the chance that they may end up having to see somebody like me down the road. So that's really what inspired the book. That was a spark for it.
How do you help a person like me?
Sure.
I'm one of those people, especially in the beginning of my marriage, that just something happens, push it down. Something happens, push it down. Keep packing until
Right.
it blows up.
Right.
How do you
Right.
overcome that mental block? How do you
Right.
how do you do that? How do you overcome and be proactive in communication? What stops people from communicating early?
One thing I've learned, especially with my experience working with males, because typically what you just described is what I typically see in a lot of males that come in.
Mhm.
And we've been socialized to believe that we cannot share our experiences and kind of what's going on. Even especially if you go in the military, it's the same thing. And I
Mhm.
jokingly say it now. If they wanted you to have feelings, they would have issued them to you. But they 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 don't give you feelings. So you just kind of got to suck it up and drive on. You hear that a whole lot, especially in the army. You hear like suck it up, drive on. And so
Mhm.
you learn over time as a male growing up, in your family, you don't cry, you don't share your feelings, you just kind of push through it. Um, and so we get socialized to believe that. And then we get married, and we're married to people who have feelings. And their feelings can be hurt sometimes by things that we say or don't say because they may interpret certain ways. So for a lot of us, we don't know, we don't have the tools yet. And so I look at every client, especially males that come in, like what you described, and I understand that this is not a person who does not have feelings. This is a person who doesn't trust yet that I can share these feelings in a way and still be heard and not also be ridiculed. This is a person who hasn't learned yet that I can trust being vulnerable and not hurt as a result of this. And so a lot of what I end up doing is teaching them, for one, I validate the fact that you do have feelings, and I validate the fact that I know that it doesn't feel safe right now to share these feelings. Like that's number one. But to also encourage them to say, because I have these feelings, I may not know how to share it, but at least start with that. Maybe that's the first thing you say is, look, I had these feelings. I shut down because I don't know how to say it in a way where it's not going to create something bigger. And
Yeah.
a lot of times that's the very, very first piece. And so we eventually teach how to work on those feelings, how to communicate them in a way that is not necessarily, like I said earlier, the right way, but how do you communicate in a way that works?
Mhm.
And that's really dependent upon what the other partner is experiencing too. So when working with couples, it is very, very tough because sometimes even when a person feels like they want to share, the other person can get triggered in some way and not feel like, all right, they don't know how to to respond to it too. And so
Yeah.
my job is to help make sure that both people can hear it in a way. And this book kind of does that too. It says, look, here's possibly why somebody might not be thinking or may not communicate a certain way. It's not necessarily about you and be more about maybe some things they've gone through.
I got a controversial question. It might be, it
Sure,
may not be.
sure.
Is there any such thing as a perfect marriage?
I think I know you're going with this.
As this is my question then. It seems that is communication,
Be all end all.
yes, is communication the solution and the problem? Is it, could any problem marriage be solved by communication? And are all problems in marriages caused because of a lack of communication? That was probably the toughest
Right.
thing for me to figure out in my head just now. So I hope I said
No.
it. I hope the question is answerable.
Yes, very answerable because I have this question in my head a lot. And so I have a friend of mine who's also a therapist. We were just talking about this over the weekend.
Okay.
What I've learned in my time as a therapist is there's two main things that really comes up in therapy. It starts out as communication. Like I don't trust if I can communicate or they communicate, this person communicates in a poor way, or I think sometimes that is it.
Mhm.
Um, but we just haven't learned yet how to communicate effectively.
Okay.
And they want to communicate, don't know how to communicate effectively. But the other piece of that too is what I call expectation management. And because my expectations are not being met in a relationship,
Mhm.
I communicate in a certain way. Or even if they are being met in a certain way, I may not communicate in a way to let my partner know, like I don't say thank you or I appreciate you. So when these things happen, communication is only, I think, what I would say is part of the dilemma. This book talks about the communication piece of it, which is why I really try to make people understand in the beginning, like, look, you want to really work on how I communicate, but it's okay to communicate that my expectations or my needs are not being met. It's a great way to do that. A very separate book could also be, which is also what I believe in, is how do I adjust my expectations? A lot of times couples will have an expectation, or one person will have an expectation that my partner should load the dishwasher a certain way, or my partner should take the trash out because it's full right now, or they have an expectation that my partner should know to get me something for my birthday or my anniversary, whatever, but they don't necessarily communicate it in that capacity.
Mhm.
And so what they'll just kind of wait for, and the person doesn't, then they'll tell you what you didn't do. And
Mhm.
so how do I make sure my expectations are healthy and helping couples realize that sometimes my expectations are not necessarily shaped based off of what said in our relationship. Maybe I
Mhm.
got this expectation because I watched Oprah while I was watching Dr.
Right.
Phil, or
Right.
maybe I saw my grandparents do something.
The
So now I
Cosby
think
Show.
exactly the Cosby Show, different world. So
Right.
you
Right.
start looking at people and you start saying, look, this is what I expect for you to be as a husband or as a wife, or this is what a relationship should be. But I don't tell you that because I think you should know that too.
Yeah.
And what I find a lot of times couples don't. So the fact that I don't have the healthiest expectations because I have expectations predetermined before I married you and I don't communicate them well too, it's almost a recipe for disaster. So my job is to make sure that I can help you communicate and address those expectations in a much healthier way.
Yeah. You're talking the book about adapting flexibility and adaptability and communication styles. Like
Right.
that's that
Yeah.
is the ability to kind of compromise, right?
Right.
I was with some friends not too long ago, and my friend, his spouse kind of touched him on the face, and he felt like that's like being like treating him like a baby, right? And I'm like, man,
Right.
you got to compromise. Like to her, that's
Right.
endearment.
Right.
She,
Right.
but to you, it feels like she's
Right.
treating you like a little baby, right? So
Right.
learning how to adapt. How do you adapt mentally,
Yeah.
emotionally, especially when it comes to things that like you were raised to believe?
Right. Right. Exactly. So I think that's the biggest piece is understanding that. And this is why we talk about the subtitle to this book is From Me to We, building a shared language for your relationship. That piece about me is so strong when we get married that we forget that I got to make room for we. And if I
Mhm.
only hold on to me and what works for me and what I think about me, then I don't create space for my partner to also have room to help shape the we. And
Mhm.
so we work together on creating this we. So I think in that example you just shared, one issue, I think there's two different things that you can look at that as. On one, he internalizes a certain type of way, but she's also had this idea about this is a form of endearment.
Mhm.
Now, is either one of those acts necessarily bad? Neither one. I mean, it's the mindset, the behavior is not a bad thing at all.
Mhm.
The challenge is, did we have a communication about what this means? And I think sometimes couples assume that, oh, I should be able to just say that. I should be able to do that because it is nice. And it probably is nice for a lot of people in the world, but doesn't mean it worked for us. And I think
Mhm.
this is where a lot of times helping people realize, and this is what I do a lot in couples therapy, there are a lot of things that can be right, but it doesn't necessarily mean it works for us. What we got to
Mhm.
figure out is what works for us. And so that's kind of to your point or to your question, you know, that being flexible means that I got to be willing to say, this is the right way, but doesn't necessarily mean it's working. And I got to figure out what's working. And when people can make that paradigm shift to say, does this work for us? Or how do we create what works for us? Then what's right and wrong begins to take on a whole nother meaning now.
As I'm listening to you, yeah, I mean, it almost sounds like you said, did we communicate about what this means?
Right.
What do you say to somebody who feels like, man, I ain't trying to talk about everything.
Exactly.
I don't
Exactly.
want to have to communicate every twist and turn and be like, explain, okay, this means this. What do you say to that?
No, it's funny because I get that sometimes, and I'm like, my profession would not be here without people having that same mindset. Like, I don't want to talk about this. I'm like, all right, cool, you don't have to, but
Yeah.
you either end up paying therapist or you're paying for a lawyer, attorney
Yeah,
down the road. And so, like,
that's a
which
good
one you want to go with? Or you
right,
could just do
right.
it yourself, and that way you have to worry about any of this. And so it's kind of like the analogy too. Like, I don't necessarily want to have to, go and get my oil change on my car. Like every time, every 3 months, every so many miles, 5,000 miles, I got to get my oil change. I mean, you don't have to. You can
Right,
not do it,
right.
but in the end, you're gonna
Eventually,
pay more for it.
yeah, yeah, yeah.
So I think this is kind of what this is. It's like, hey, how do I do the proper maintenance on my relationship to make sure I'm doing the right tune-ups at the time we need to? And the other thing too is this is not something I have to do all the time. I think when people start out having this idea of this is what it takes to do it, it gets easier. These communication skills, this expectation management is really about it's like working out in the gym. You're working out, you're probably doing your curls, you're doing your squats, you got a good form with it. Eventually you can add more weight to it. But you get to a point where you're pretty strong at it, and it's not that you have to do this, every day, but eventually it's like, look, if I do this, periodically, I kind of come in, I check in, I'm doing the right things to make sure my relationship is manageable. It's something that, we both connected to each other. I know what she's thinking, I know what he's feeling. You don't have to do it as much down the road because you've already built up the process. And so I think for a lot of people, when they understand that in the beginning, it does seem like it's a lot more work, but eventually it's not as much as you would think it is because you begin to almost read it and know that this is how this works. When anniversary time comes around, you already know because you've been married now for 3 or 4 years, kind of what to do. When
Mhm.
she's having a tough day at work and she comes home, and she's been telling you, about this tough time she's had with a boss. You kind of know, like, okay, cool, I understand, do this. Now I know how to do this instead. Maybe I turn the TV on and, maybe get a glass of wine and, then I leave her alone, like, because you've learned over a period of time.
Yeah.
But eventually you kind of begin to read these, but it's always a great idea to check back in just to make sure you're doing the right thing.
Well, man, I'm really glad you're able to come on. I wish we could talk longer, but people, you need this book. You need this book. Just reading it and just, in fact, talking to you now, I'm getting some ideas of like some communication sessions that I want to have with my wife, right? And so this is a great book, and it's not just for Christian couples, right? It's not just for Black couples, white couples. It's for all couples. So, Doc, why don't you tell people how they can get this book and get in contact with you, because you do public speaking, you speak to couples. How can people get in contact with you?
Absolutely. So you can find the book, especially on the website, Eric Williams. It's a hyphen phd.com. Again, it's just my name, Eric Williams phd.com. That's where you can find the book. Also, I have a private practice. My practice name is Coastal Family Services. And that website, if you just Google Coastal Family Services, you will also see my website, and that's how couples can find me, or individuals as well. I work with a lot of individuals that are part of a relationship, and then we kind of do one-on-one work until we can get the other partner to be in too. So those are the key ways to get to me. I'm also on Instagram at Purpose in Hope Dealer. Weird name, but Purpose in Hope Dealer. And also on Facebook as well. I have a Facebook page, also called Coastal Family Services. So those are great ways to reach out to me, to find me. You can always, again, once you get to my website, it's the opportunity to send me a message, and I'll respond to you within 24 hours.
Awesome. Doc, we appreciate you being on the show. Everyone, I want you to like, subscribe, and share this video. Let's get the word out about Dr. Williams and this amazing book, Marriage Communication Guide for New Couples. And it's not just for new couples, if you're an old couple as well.
Absolutely.
I appreciate you, Doc, and you have a wonderful day.
Yes, sir. Thank you so much.